Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH3501 Community Media Leadership. And in this session, this is the first one back after Christmas, so Happy New Year. Hope you had a great Christmas. Hope you got some reading done, some work done, some resting done. You overindulged a bit, but you've recovered and you've slept quite a bit, so you're ready to kind of crack on and get on with some community media work. Hooray! What I want to cover in this session is a new lecture which draws on the work of Lenny and Tashi, which is the communication for development model. And I'm going to go through it in some detail over the next couple of weeks. I've kind of now got this as a template, and there's about 7 sections which I think we should kind of go through and look at each section in a bit more detail in order to understand a kind of, if you like, the principles of evaluation. So one of the things that defines this module and is in the title is this idea of leadership. And leadership isn't just about kind of being the man in charge or the woman in charge and chasing on someone, following something. It's about knowing what works and what doesn't work, and in what context what works and what doesn't work. So it's about having a kind of a sense of evaluation. And there are different ways that we can use and think about evaluation systems in order to be able to apply and aim for different goals and different outcomes than we might get from a more traditional kind of approach. And I think community media represents a very different kind of model of expectation and a very different model of integration and engagement, which therefore needs a different form of evaluation in the process of developing a social media project. Right, get these words out. So it's kind of what we'll look at is the idea of kind of how, at the heart of a lot of community media these days is the idea of participation. So what do we mean from that when we live in a world where the kind of outcomes and the processes and the practices, they're emergent, they're not defined, they're ad hoc, they're not in a not linear, they don't move in a straight line. How do we make sense of those kind of things? Because on the one hand, a typical organisation that has objectives needs to reach things in a fairly linear, step-by-step way. But people are, people are less. They don't fit those kind of models. People live in very different ways, and things come and go, and people's experiences and expectations change, and the challenges that people have in order to give them a sense of confidence and capability within a society aren't defined by something that you can read in a managerial textbook, because life changes, people move on, resources change, expectations change, technology changes, social relationships change. So in short, how do we develop a framework? This is what Lenny and Tashi argue, is how can we develop an evaluation framework that helps us to plan and helps us to evaluate, rather than just, if you like, ticking boxes in a process. So what we'll do is, one of the stress, if you like, on community media and community development, which is, we've linked the two, is the idea of kind of building capacity and capability, and what makes people engaged in communities, what makes their practices sustainable, and something which is satisfying, rather than it being something which is imposed from above, or which is, if you like, temporary. And how do you know that what you do makes a lasting difference, and doesn't alienate people in the process, because it's what you're offering is so different from their social experience. You're imposing a model from outside rather than drawing on the skills and the knowledge and the values of the people who are engaged and involved in the process. So it's, managing social change is, I suppose, one of the key issues. What kind of change, and how do we know that things have changed, and how do we know that they've changed for the better? And particularly, how is this done in an element, a situation where it's very difficult to define and measure what the changes are and what the changes might have been that have been brought about. So if we look at kind of issues of participation, there's a number of elements to participation, and we've talked about this previously, which tell us It's located in a particular process, in a particular place, amongst particular people. So it could go in many different directions. There's nothing inherent. We've established this. There's nothing inherent within participation to say that it should be progressive and good. It could be that participative practices are used negatively, and that there's a regression about it as well, and it's used to divide people as much as it's used to bring people together. But how do we measure and how do we understand the contexts, the way in which people build and develop their relationships in these contexts, in order to be able to move forward and to offer a kind of sense, understand the depth and the value and the sense of inclusion and the kind of sense of, a realistic sense of expectation about what can be achieved and what is held back in a community media, community development situation. So what we'll look at with the Lenny and Tashi model is there's a general set of principles that they apply about how we evaluate social change. So what we're going to look at over the coming weeks is, in more detail, is how we would design an ongoing set of evaluation topics and processes, because that will tell us, a methodology. That will tell us if we're on the right track or not. And what should we be aiming for, and what is realistically achievable as an outcome of those processes, so that we can demonstrate and say, look, we've made a difference. That's what we're trying to aim for and trying to achieve. There's some theory-based work to be done, I suppose, but we also need to be looking at, and some of these concepts will be familiar. If we go back to we talked about in the second year about the design process and what a holistic design methodology process for community development brings, how can we tap into that for community evaluation of community media projects, and what that means in practice. So a lot to be thinking about as ever. The notes are up on the DMU Commons wiki. Just go to wiki.hour.dmu.ac.uk, look for the TECH3501 section, excuse me, and I'll see you at the lecture on Tuesday.